Hi there, I'm the Mythkeeper. Welcome back to my channel. This week we're continuing our series on the Ancestries of Pathfinder. We've done humans, we've done elves, we've done dwarves. Now we're doing a mixed bag. We're talking about the small folk of the world of Pathfinder. That means halflings, that means gnomes, and as of the second edition, that means goblins as well. So I'm going to talk a little bit about them. I hope you enjoy.
Let's start with halflings. Anyone that's watched The Lord of the Rings has a pretty good idea about what halflings are all about.
Concerning hobbits. Hobbits have been living and farming in the four farthings of the Shire for many hundreds of years, quite content to ignore and be ignored by the world of the big folk. Middle-earth being, after all, full of strange creatures beyond count, hobbits must seem of little importance, being neither renowned as great warriors, nor counted among the very wise. In fact, it has been remarked by some that hobbits' only real passion is for food. A rather unfair observation, as we have also developed a keen interest in the brewing of ales and the smoking of pipeweed. But where our hearts truly lie is in peace and quiet and good tilled earth. For all hobbits share a love of things that grow.
The Halflings of Golarion share a good deal in common with Tolkien's hobbits. They are a simple folk who usually prefer to stay safely in the background. They enjoy being useful to others, and to their own families in particular, but they generally dislike receiving public accolades for their efforts. In Pathfinder, there are few thriving, exclusively halfling communities, like the Shire, though there are some exceptions I'll discuss later on. Maybe this is because the world of Pathfinder is so dangerous that it's unsuited for quiet communities. Instead, the halflings of Pathfinder tend to share communities with humans or other large folk, and quite a few halflings can be found in almost every human city in the innersea. Despite being a humble and cautious people on the whole, young halflings are sometimes prone to wanderlust, and may strike out on their own across the land with little more than the few coins they've scraped together, a lucky memento or two, and their irrepressible personalities. These young halflings are lean and quick, and most are, by human standards, a little bit larcenous in their habits. This inclination to thievery doesn't arise from inherent greed. Instead, halflings love light-hearted mischief, and also tend to have a more communal notion of property. Most halflings simply pick up a tool or bauble when it's useful, and return it once they're done with it. Older or more established halflings may take on supporting positions in a community, working as valets, shopkeepers, or artisans, but they retain their keen senses, deft fingers, and cheery outlook even as they age. Older halflings often enjoy doting on younger ones, passing down tools, weapons, and stories. Because there are few exclusively halfling communities, halflings mimic culture and traditions of the humans they live alongside. This also means there isn't a distinct halfling history for me to talk you through here, so instead, consider that halflings have lived alongside human communities for millennia, and so depending on where your halfling is from, that halfling's history and culture will be shared with the history of their human counterparts. A halfling from Taldor will, for example, consider Kadirans or Kelishites to be an ancestral enemy, just as much as a Taldan human would. And a halfling from Ustalav will be just as informed about the lingering threat of the Whispering Tyrant, and just as predisposed to worship Pharasma as any human living there might be. So for halfling characters, consider watching my 2 human videos, or my History of Golarion video, for more general history to tie into your character's backstory. Halflings also worship all the same gods that humans do, although there are a few deities that are exclusive to the halflings. Let's talk about these. The first is Chaldira, who is sometimes known by the moniker the Calamitous Turn. She's a neutral good goddess of mischief, battle, and luck, and she is close friends to Desna, who is also frequently favored among halflings. The second is a more sinister deity, named Thamir Gix. There is some kind of relationship between Thamir Gix and Norgorber, the god of thieves and assassins. Friend, servant, or slave, the true nature of that relationship is unknown, even among those who worship him. Thamir Gix, like Norgorber, is a god of thievery, and also of opportunity, greed, and trickery. Now let's discuss some of the unique cultural subgroup and communities that exist among the halflings of the Inner Sea. Let's start with the unfortunate state of affairs in Cheliax. Halflings have long been slaves in Cheliax, where they are forced to labor in occupations that exploit their keen eyes and quick fingers to produce quick profits for their overseers, such as textile production or orchard picking. Others serve as household slaves, often as cooks and valets. These slaves typically are required to perform less arduous tasks, but suffer frequent abuse. Legal punishments for beating, mutilating, or even killing a halfling in Cheliax is appallingly light, and classified as a property crime, even when perpetrated against the nation's few free halflings. Not surprisingly, an organization devoted to smuggling halfling slaves to safety has emerged in Cheliax. This group is called the Bellflower Network. Halfling slaves support and shelter Bellflower agents when possible, and it speaks volumes to halfling camaraderie that so many of them turn down a chance at personal freedom to become Bellflower agents themselves. Next, let's move on to some communities of halflings that have emerged as distinct groups from humans. We will start north and move south. First, in Iobaria and Brevoy, we get the Mirini halflings. These halflings developed among the colder climates of the region and have a unique appearance, with sharper chins and wider ears. They are also thinner than most halflings. Most Mirini halflings have long, fine hair that grows black with white streaks, or vice versa, and they cannot grow facial hair. The Mirini people used to be the largest community of halflings in the world, until they were struck by a terrible plague called the Choking Death, which swept through their lands in 2742, almost 2 millennia ago now. In Iobaria, the disease killed nearly 3/4 of the nation's inhabitants, halfling or otherwise, leaving many of its cities completely abandoned in its wake, and leading to a near total collapse of the nation. The Mirini survivors soon scattered throughout Iobaria and beyond. Today, many Mirini live along the eastern edges of Avestan, particularly near Brevoy, Galt, and the River Kingdoms. Mirini halflings move in large tribes, and are typically a nomadic people, uprooting at the first sign of possible disaster. These tribes maintain few written records, and instead keep oral histories, telling tales from previous homes and lessons learned from previous dangers. Next, we move to the closest thing that the Pathfinder world has to the Shire, and it is around the Verduran forest of Taldor. Here are the Ullum halflings. These halflings have lived in and around the forest for centuries, enjoying simple lives. Most Ullum halflings are not distinguishable from other Taldan halflings, although they do have trouble growing facial hair, so sideburns are quite common. Ullum halflings tend to keep their hair short and enjoy simple, functional clothing that is useful and reliable. The relatively stable Ullum lifestyle, with few external threats, leads many of these halflings to seek out simple comforts and pursuits that they find extremely fulfilling. They often adopt professions that require dedication and discipline, such as farming, sewing, or banking. They also eagerly take on tasks that require planning and hard work, such as shipbuilding or construction. Although Ullums like the long process of creation, they are often very free with the fruits of their labor. They often enjoy crafting comfortable homesteads for family and friends, and make a decent living from well-tended crops. Continuing south, in the barrier mountains of Garand, we find a halfling group called the Jarraks. Their rugged lifestyle among the peaks has shaped their features. Their skin is deeply tanned and weathered from spending most of their lives outdoors, and their bodies are slightly shorter and stockier compared to other halflings. Jarraks are particularly muscular due to traversing the cliffs and rock walls of the barrier wall. This prowess steers Jarraks towards more physical pursuits, such as combat, with many Jarrak children growing up wrestling one another for fun. The rough nature of their endeavors leaves many Jarraks with black eyes or scars, something they wear with pride. Jarraks sport dark brown eyes and darker hair colors, such as black and brown. They enjoy adopting bombastic hairstyles, and among men, impressive facial hair. Finally, we reach the Mwangi Expanse. This fertile land is full of all types of people, and halflings are no exception. The Songo halflings live here, and they are the most reclusive of all the halfling subtypes. Because of their skittishness and reluctance to interact with others, Songo halflings preserve a rich and ancient culture that developed in isolation in the Laughing Jungle. They enjoy fleeting art such as music made with impromptu items, or sculptures of earth and leaves. Most Songo halflings like to paint their bodies, especially their faces, and they enjoy showing off their designs to others, although they are reluctant to compliment even skillful work, because in their culture, compliments are said to bring bad luck. They are very fond of flowers and use them to adorn their homes, wagons, and clothing. But of course, halflings are not the only small folk that can be found across the lands of Golarion. The gnomes of the Pathfinder world are one of the defining features of this setting, a unique people with a distinctive appearance and history. Millennia ago, gnomes were among the many fey creatures cavorting about in the First World, a realm of abundant light, life, and remorseless fancy. However, a terrible cataclysm in the First World led to many gnomes fleeing from their ancestral home. The gnomes who reached Golarion struggled to adapt, not just to find food and shelter, but to retain their identity and supernatural grip on life. With their connection to the First World severed, gnomes began withering slowly, bleeding their color, curiosity, and vitality in a process known as the bleaching. Only by engaging in new and wondrous experiences can gnomes sustain their minds and stave off this ancestral curse, recapturing just enough of the whimsy of their lost homeland to survive and even thrive. Gnome appearance is as mutable as the fey world they come from. Individual gnome physiology spans the full range of human eye, skin, and hair colorations, and beyond, including shades of green, blue, pink, purple, and other hues. The color of these features are most vibrant early in a gnome's life, growing slightly more subdued with age. The need for novelty drives many of a gnome's actions. Periods of idleness are harmless and even refreshing, yet weeks, months, or years without some goal, project, or other stimulus to fuel a gnome's imagination leaves them vulnerable to the bleaching. Whereas on the First World any energy lost would quickly be replaced by that plane's ubiquitous wonder, on the material plane a gnome's innate magic gradually seeps into their surroundings. However, staying active and engaged cause a gnome to generate enough magic to counteract this loss. But once a gnome succumbed too far, the final stages of the bleaching drain their remaining color. The bleaching is typically lethal, though a tiny fraction survive to become so-called bleachlings, strangely calm and pale gnomes that most other gnomes view with fearful respect. Gnomes do not have traditional ethnicities as humans might categorize them. The prevailing magical forces of an area will shape a gnome's appearance and disposition as much as conventional genetics do. As a result, a region's gnomes drift towards common traits that are largely independent of actual lineage. Let's start with the most abundant type of gnome, the Feychild gnomes. The most numerous of the gnomes, Feychild gnomes also have the strongest connection to their ancestral homeland, the First World. These are gnomes suffused with Fey magic. Having developed a bond to a mighty natural feature or primal source, these gnomes are the most likely to display naturally bright and fantastic features, including bright hair and eyes that include yellow, green, orange, blue, and pink hues, among others, and tend toward tan, pale, or green skin. Despite having the most natural magical foundation, these gnomes' Fey connection is considered the least stable and most in need of stimulus. As a result, Feychild gnomes are often capricious and emotive, regularly seeking new experiences, playing pranks, and fueling countless gnome stereotypes. However, their intense First World connection also often grants Feychild gnomes a rapport with animals and plants, ensuring they never want for friends. Elves usually respect these gnomes' Fey aspects, albeit often through a somewhat paternalistic lens. Feychild gnomes are most common in Andoran, the lands of the Linorm kings, the Mwangi Expanse, and the River Kingdoms. The second largest group of gnomes are Glimmer gnomes, or Godling gnomes. These are gnomes suffused with divine magic. These gnomes possess a natural talent for illusion and reality-warping magic. These vibrant-haired gnomes often have slightly translucent hair that seems to glow in the light, and glowing metallic irises in their eyes. Glimmer gnomes favor invisibility spells, and they possess a penchant for appearing and disappearing unpredictably, like mischievous tricksters who always seem to emerge or vanish at the most advantageous times. Glimmer gnomes are most common where there are powerful religious connections, which is almost everywhere in the innersea. Small groups can be found associated with Nidal's obedience to Zon-Kuthon, Osirion's reverence of Nethys, and even near Casmaran's accursed pit of Gormuz, where Rovagug is sealed. A significant population of these gnomes can also be found near Absalom's Starstone Cathedral, where the divine energy of the Starstone is fuel enough for the gnomes who live there to help stave off the bleaching for centuries. The third largest group of gnomes are Keenspark gnomes. These are gnomes suffused with arcane magic, or other forms of magic bound to artifacts and magical items. These gnomes aren't content to soak in the world's wonders. They possess an especially strong drive to create their own. Dedicated to innovation, Keenspark gnomes regularly prod at the edges of reality and possibility, not only inventing strange devices and pioneering new magical theories, but also challenging long-held beliefs and religious assumptions. As a result, these iconoclasts and innovators are the gnomes most likely to come across as perfectionists, dismissive, controlling, or outright irritating, leading to their gnome kin jokingly referring to them as sour gnomes. However, their knowledge is a boon in a wide variety of fields, and Keenspark gnomes are among the foremost wizards, engineers, philosophers, and craftspeople. Compared to their colorful kin, Keenspark gnomes have comparably drab skin, hair, and eye coloration that closely mirrors common human hues. These gnomes are most common in areas of intense arcane innovation, or eldritch devastation. As a result, Nex and the Mana Wastes are home to substantial populations of Keenspark gnomes. Likewise, Absalom's arcane universities attract and shape a healthy Keenspark population. Perhaps more oddly, Rahadum's small gnome population is overwhelmingly Keenspark in nature, perhaps due to the country's long-standing rebuke of divine influence. The rarest group of gnomes are fel gnomes. When gnomes come of age near an area of darker magical forces, their physiology seems to absorb some of those foreboding elements. These children boast eerily exaggerated features, such as spindly fingers, two wide grins, and exaggerated eyes. Fel gnomes also tend to favor dark humor that thoroughly disquiets bystanders, particularly when combined with chilling magic that shatters preconceptions that gnomes are inherently bright creatures. Though fel gnomes are not intrinsically cruel or morose, many enjoy leveraging their disquieting characteristics in social settings. To this end, fel gnomes often favor darker colors, asymmetrical clothing, and imposing garments. Fel gnomes often reside near occult nexuses, such as those found in Cheliax, Druma, and Ustalav. Finally, there is a fifth category of gnome. This is not truly a distinct type, as others are, but a category for those gnomes that survive the bleaching. I am referring, of course, to the bleachlings, those gnomes with the debatable fortune to survive the bleaching. These gnomes are pale reflections of their former selves, drained of color and strong emotion. Despite the fearful stigma that most gnomes have for bleachlings, the latter seem utterly at peace with their new condition. Those are all the common gnome types of Golarion. However, there are some subgroups of gnomes that have been altered so much since their departure of the first world that they are often not considered gnomes at all, but they do have a shared origin with other gnomes. These are Spriggans, or Lonely Ones, gnomes who acquired a form of magical vampirism and have become bitter, territorial creatures. Also, the Zvirfneblins, or Dark Gnomes, have made their homes in the deep places of the Darklands, and like the Drow or the Dwergar, have become dark, corrupted versions of their former selves. Now that I've talked about halflings and gnomes, I want to save a little time to talk about goblins in Pathfinder. Goblins in Pathfinder are immediately recognizable. One of the decisions Paizo made very early on was to give goblins as a creature type a very recognizable and specific design, and they are often used in Pathfinder promotional material because they are so distinct, with their small bodies, large heads, and razor-sharp teeth-filled maws. Initially, this was about building a distinct brand identity from D&D, and these comic relief goblins feature heavily as villains in early Pathfinder adventures, especially in their first ever published adventure, Rise of the Runelords. As time has gone on, it's become clear that there is enough enthusiasm around Pathfinder goblins that players really want to play goblins. As of the release of the new edition, they have since been promoted to one of the earliest released options for player character types. I'm still someone that has played a good deal more first edition than second edition, and I still instinctively think of goblins as NPCs rather than player characters, but since they have a whole chapter dedicated to them in the second edition character guide, I'd expect to see a lot more goblin characters going forward. So here's a brief intro to goblins as player characters in the world of Pathfinder. Goblin legend claims that the first goblins on Golarion were born from the human blood spilled by 4 Barghests, goblinoid demons that hail from the abyss, the forefathers of Golarion's goblins. Each of these Barghests gave the goblins a gift to help them prosper. From Hadragash came the gift of tribe, making goblins stronger in numbers. Vankelvor gave goblins a bottomless hunger that drove them to spread out across the world. Zarangel, the most bestial of the Barghests, granted an affinity with predators, such as goblin dogs and wolves, so that goblins could fight with company and travel more quickly. Finally, Zogmugot taught the goblins the secrets of survival, how to scrounge, fish, and seek, so they could scavenge and thrive no matter where they found themselves. Over time, goblins spread across Golarion, and today they can be found across the innersea region, from the sweltering jungles of Medjugorje Island to the frozen and blighted forests of Iobaria. Despite the overwhelmingly negative perception most other people have of goblins, the small people have begun to find places among other societies, among orcs, or even in human cities and towns. While cities like Magnamar have long tolerated the goblin tribes that occupy their sewers, viewing them as a convenient cleaning service preventing disease-bearing rats or dangerous otyugs from proliferating, there are more and more areas where goblins can walk openly on the streets without fear of being skewered by a guard or a frightened farmer. On the sun-scorched streets of Katapesh, a tribe of rasp goblins maintain a thriving mercantile enterprise under the leadership of an elderly goblin known by the name Ygrig Moneymaker. Operating in the northern lands of Irisin, the lands of the Linorm kings, and even the southern edge of the Crown of the World, a band of frost goblins recruited by the Pathfinder Society acts as a team of scouts and guides for the Society's members and allies. In the land of Sarkoris, a cunning tribe of forest goblins fights alongside the Sarkorian refugees looking to reclaim their homeland from the demons and monsters that infest it. In the Shackles, pirate crews have started to recruit monkey goblins for their excellent service as riggers. Their means and circumstances vary greatly, but goblins across Golarion have begun to carve a niche for themselves where they can be accepted.
And that sums up the small folk of the world of Golarion. Next week, we're going to continue our series on the Ancestries of Pathfinder, and I'm going to get a little bit weirder. We're going to talk about some more unusual heritages. Stay tuned to see what that's all about. In any case, if you enjoyed this content, be sure to like and subscribe. And if I talked about anything you want to know more about, let me know in the comments below. I'll see you next week.